On April 18th, local police pulled a body from a canal in Saharanpur. The victim was a man, tightly bound, with 3 gunshot wounds to the chest. His face had been crushed to the point where visual identification was impossible. With no leads and no one to claim him, the investigation stalled. The police eventually cremated the body, keeping only his blood-stained clothes as a final piece of evidence. 10 days later, nearly 800 kilometers away in the forests of Mirzapur, a second discovery was made. A woman's body had been stuffed into a heavy sack, her throat slit with surgical precision. At first, there was no reason to link these 2 crimes. They were separated by hundreds of miles and handled by different jurisdictions, both unaware they were looking at 2 halves of the same conspiracy. The woman in the forest was 27-year-old Rakhi Kashyap. Online, she was known to thousands of followers as the Bullet Girlfriend. Her Instagram was a constant stream of high-end fantasy. She posted reels from grand palaces and luxury hotels, often posing with a licensed pistol to project an image of a bold, untouchable woman living a life of leisure. But the luxury was a thin veneer. In reality, Rakhi was a contract worker from a struggling family, living in a world far removed from the marble floors and high-end resorts she displayed to her followers. To maintain this fiction, Rakhi targeted wealthy men. She would draw them into relationships and then use her tough girl persona and political connections to extort massive sums of money for her silence. As police began examining her private messages, they found a pattern of aggressive financial demands and threats. The woman in the sack hadn't just been a victim, she had been a professional predator. Rakhi's primary target was Vikrant Kumar, a married city manager who had spent 3 years trapped in an increasingly volatile affair with her. Vikrant was caught in a cycle of diminishing returns. He had already sacrificed his savings and his marriage to keep the affair a secret. The more he gave, the more he felt he had to give just to keep his world from collapsing, even when Rakhi began demanding he sign over a valuable plot of land. When Vikrant finally tried to set a boundary, Rakhi burned his car. It was an act of desperation that backfired, forcing Vikrant to finally confess the entire affair to his wife. With her leverage gone, Rakhi pivoted to violence. She recruited a local politician named Sudharas and his friend Kapil, convincing them that killing Vikrant was the only way to secure the assets they all wanted. On April 15th, Rakhi lured Vikrant to a flat, where she shot him 3 times. After crushing his face to hide his identity, the trio drove his body over 100 miles to dump him in a Saharanpur canal. The unidentified body from the start of our story was Vikrant. Rakhi had successfully eliminated her victim, but the momentum of the crime was about to turn against her. Within days of Vikrant's disappearance, his wife filed a missing persons report. She didn't hold back, naming Rakhi as a dangerous blackmailer who had been threatening her husband's life. When the local police finally brought Rakhi in for questioning, the pressure shifted. Her accomplices, Sudharas and Kapil, realized the investigation was moving too fast and too close to home. They knew Rakhi's history. They understood that if the police pushed hard enough, she would gladly trade them both for her own freedom. To silence the risk, they invited her to a remote farmhouse to celebrate their success. They waited until Rakhi was heavily intoxicated and completely off her guard. While she was nearly unconscious, they slit her throat, stuffed her into a sack, and drove 800 kilometers to Mirzapur, using the same tactics she had used on Vikrant to dispose of her. The manipulator, who had spent years treating men as disposable assets, was ultimately treated the exact same way by the men she trusted to help her commit murder. When Rakhi vanished shortly after her police interview, investigators stopped looking for a witness and started looking for a signal. They began pulling the cell tower logs for every person involved. On the night Vikrant vanished, the signals from his phone, Rakhi's, and Kapil's all converged at a single point in town. Then they moved together in a straight line toward the canal in Saharanpur. This movement gave police a specific window of time and a specific location. They checked the records for any unidentified bodies pulled from those canals on that exact date. When investigators showed the clothing from that unclaimed body to Vikrant's wife, her reaction confirmed the connection. The physical evidence finally had a name. The digital signals from a single night in April had bridged the 800-kilometer gap between the 2 victims, exposing the entire conspiracy. To look at Rakhi Kashyap's life is to see a specific combination of traits that almost inevitably lead to a violent end. First, an obsessive need for a powerful self-image. Second, a ruthless willingness to exploit others as tools for her own gain. The final element is callous violence, killing someone she knew for years without hesitation. When these traits overlap, the person becomes a predator with no off switch. Rakhi's mistake was believing her own social media persona. She thought she was the only predator in the room, forgetting that the lifestyle she craved is built on a lack of loyalty. When your entire life is built on betrayal and extortion, the people standing next to you are simply waiting for their own opportunity to strike.